You think soil is just dirt until you watch it breathe. That's what happens when worms move in, turning lifeless ground into something alive, porous, something that holds water like a sponge and feeds your plants like a slow-release miracle. I mixed one simple ingredient into my garden beds, and within 72 hours the earth was crawling with them, tunneling, aerating, transforming everything from the ground up. If you want to see what I poured into that soil and why it worked so fast, stay with me through this whole video, because what I'm about to share will change the way you think about feeding your garden. And hey, if you're serious about growing healthier plants without spending a fortune on fertilizers, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you don't miss the next tip. I'm glad you're here, and I think you're going to love what we uncover today. So let's talk about what actually happened. I took used coffee grounds, the kind most of us toss in the trash every single morning, and I worked them into the top few inches of soil around my tomato plants and pepper beds. Coffee grounds are slightly acidic, rich in nitrogen, and they smell earthy and organic, which worms absolutely cannot resist. Within 3 days, I started noticing fresh castings on the surface, those little piles of digested soil that looked like tiny coils of dark chocolate. That's when I knew they'd arrived. Earthworms are drawn to organic matter that's decomposing, and coffee grounds break down quickly, releasing nutrients and creating an irresistible buffet for these underground gardeners. The worms tunnel through the soil, leaving behind channels that allow air and water to penetrate deeper, which means roots can spread farther and plants grow stronger. You don't need fancy amendments or expensive worm bins. Just save your morning brew leftovers, let them cool, and scatter them around your plants. If you're in the Pacific Northwest, where the soil tends to be naturally acidic, coffee grounds blend right in. If you're gardening in alkaline regions like parts of Arizona or Southern California, use them sparingly around acid-loving plants like blueberries or azaleas. The beauty of this method is that it's free, it reduces waste, and it works fast. Have you ever tried using coffee grounds in your garden, or is this the first time you're hearing about it? Now here's something that might surprise you. Cardboard isn't just for moving boxes and Amazon deliveries. It's one of the most effective worm magnets you can lay down in your garden, and it doubles as a weed barrier that eventually feeds the soil. I tore up some plain brown cardboard, the kind without glossy prints or heavy inks, soaked it in water until it felt like a wet sponge, and laid it flat between my vegetable rows. Within a week, I lifted a corner and found dozens of red wigglers congregating underneath, feasting on the decomposing fibers. Cardboard provides shelter, moisture, and food all at once. Worms love the cool, dark environment it creates, and as they break it down, they're also processing carbon into the soil, balancing out nitrogen-rich materials like grass clippings or kitchen scraps. If you live in a hot, dry climate like Texas or Nevada, wet cardboard helps retain moisture during those brutal summer months. In wetter areas like the Southeast, it still works beautifully because worms thrive in humidity. Just make sure you're using plain cardboard without tape, staples, or plastic coatings. Lay it down in spring or fall when the soil is already moist, and let nature do the rest. The cardboard will decompose in a few months, leaving behind nothing but rich, aerated soil and a thriving worm population. Do you have cardboard piling up at home that you could turn into worm habitat? Let me tell you about something even simpler. Banana peels. Yes, those yellow skins you throw away after breakfast are like candy to earthworms, and they're packed with potassium, phosphorus, and calcium, all nutrients your plants desperately need. I started burying chopped banana peels about 2 inches deep around my cucumber vines and squash plants, and the results were stunning. Not only did the worms show up within days, but the plants themselves started producing bigger, healthier fruits with thicker stems and darker leaves. Banana peels break down relatively fast, especially in warm soil, and as they decompose, they release nutrients slowly, feeding both the worms and the plants at the same time. The worms tunnel toward the peels, dragging them deeper into the soil and mixing them with minerals and microbes. If you're growing heavy feeders like tomatoes, peppers, or squash anywhere from the Midwest to the Deep South, banana peels are a game changer. Just chop them into small pieces so they decompose faster and bury them near the root zone, not right against the stem. You can also toss them into your compost pile if you have one, but burying them directly gives you faster results. Here's a bonus tip. Freeze your banana peels throughout the week, then bury a bunch at once. Freezing breaks down the cell walls, making them decompose even quicker. Have you ever buried fruit scraps in your garden? Or does this sound like something you'd be willing to try? Now let's talk about crushed eggshells, because this is where things get interesting. Eggshells are pure calcium carbonate, and while they take longer to break down than coffee grounds or banana peels, they're incredibly valuable for both worms and plants. I rinse my eggshells, let them dry, then crush them into small pieces using a mortar and pestle, or just a rolling pin. I sprinkle them around my brassicas, things like broccoli, cabbage, and kale, which are notorious for developing blossom end rot when calcium is lacking. Worms are attracted to the gritty texture of crushed eggshells because it helps them grind up food in their gizzards, kind of like how birds swallow small stones. As the worms work the eggshells into the soil, they're also distributing calcium throughout the root zone, strengthening cell walls and preventing nutrient deficiencies. If you're in areas with naturally acidic soil, like parts of New England or the Pacific Northwest, eggshells also help raise the pH slightly over time. Don't expect instant results here. This is a slow-release amendment, but it's worth it. I save eggshells in a container on my counter, and once I have a decent amount, I crush them and work them into the soil before planting or as a side dressing during the growing season. What's your favorite way to reuse kitchen scraps in the garden? Here's where most gardeners make a mistake. They think worms only show up if you add organic matter, but they forget about moisture. Worms breathe through their skin, and if the soil is bone dry, they'll either burrow deep or leave altogether. I started using a simple technique that changed everything. I water deeply but infrequently, soaking the soil to about 6 inches down. Then I cover it with a thick layer of mulch, could be shredded leaves, straw, or even grass clippings. That mulch layer keeps the soil cool and moist, creating the perfect environment for worms to stay active near the surface where your plant roots need them most. In hot states like Georgia or Oklahoma, this technique is essential during summer. Without mulch, the top layer of soil bakes hard, and worms retreat to cooler depths where they're not doing your plants any good. In cooler climates, mulch still helps, by moderating temperature swings and keeping moisture consistent. The key is to never let the soil dry out completely. Worms can sense moisture and they'll migrate toward it. If you want them working in your vegetable beds, keep those beds consistently moist but not waterlogged. A drip irrigation system or soaker hoses work beautifully for this. Once you've got the moisture right and the mulch in place, you'll notice worm activity increases dramatically. Are you already mulching your garden, or is this something you've been meaning to try? Now let me share something that sounds almost too simple. Shredded leaves. Every fall, neighborhoods across America are filled with bags of leaves waiting for trash pickup, and those bags are pure gold for attracting worms. I rake up oak leaves, maple leaves, whatever's available, and I run them through a mulching mower, or just chop them up with a string trimmer in a trash can. Then I spread them 2 to 3 inches thick over my garden beds. Leaves are high in carbon, which balances nitrogen-rich materials, and as they break down, they create a soft, crumbly layer that worms find irresistible. I've seen worm populations explode after adding shredded leaves in both spring and fall. In the Midwest, where winters can be harsh, a thick leaf mulch also insulates the soil, protecting worm eggs and keeping the soil ecosystem alive through the cold months. In milder regions like the Southeast or West Coast, leaves break down faster, feeding worms year-round. Oak leaves take a bit longer to decompose because they're tougher, but that just means they provide long-term benefits. Maple and birch leaves break down quicker, giving you faster results. Don't bag those leaves this fall. Shred them and let them feed your soil. What trees do you have in your yard that could provide free mulch? Here's a myth I need to bust right now. People think adding worms to their garden is the solution, so they buy bags of red wigglers or night crawlers and dump them into their beds. But here's the truth. If your soil isn't hospitable, those worms won't stick around. They'll either die or migrate somewhere better. Instead of buying worms, focus on creating the conditions that attract native worms naturally. That means adding organic matter regularly, keeping the soil moist, avoiding chemical fertilizers and pesticides that kill beneficial organisms, and letting nature do its thing. Native earthworms are already in your soil, or they're nearby, waiting for the right environment. When you add coffee grounds, cardboard, banana peels, crushed eggshells, mulch, and shredded leaves, you're sending out an invitation. The worms will come. I've seen it happen in as little as 3 days, and once they arrive, they stick around as long as the food and moisture keep coming. If you've been considering buying worms, save your money and invest in organic matter instead. You'll get better, longer-lasting results. Have you ever bought worms for your garden, or did you let them show up on their own? Let me tell you about Compost Tea, because this is where things get fascinating. Compost tea is basically liquid gold for your soil, and it's one of the fastest ways to boost microbial activity, which in turn attracts worms. I make mine by filling a 5-gallon bucket with water, adding a few shovelfuls of finished compost, and letting it steep for 24 to 48 hours, stirring occasionally. Then I strain out the solids and pour the tea around my plants. The liquid is teeming with beneficial bacteria, fungi, and nutrients, and it supercharges the soil ecosystem. Worms are drawn to areas with high microbial activity because microbes break down organic matter into forms worms can digest. When I started using compost tea monthly, I noticed a significant increase in worm castings around my beds. You can use it on vegetables, herbs, ornamentals, anything. It's gentle enough that you can't really overdo it, and it gives plants an immediate boost while feeding the soil long term. If you don't have compost yet, you can buy organic compost from a garden center and still make tea. The results are worth it. Do you already make compost tea, or is this your first time hearing about it? I saved the one that surprised me most for last, and it's something you probably never considered. Molasses. Yes, the thick dark syrup you might use for baking or barbecue sauce is an incredible soil amendment that feeds beneficial microbes, which then attract worms in droves. I mix 1 tablespoon of unsulfured molasses into a gallon of water and pour it around my garden beds once a month during the growing season. Molasses is pure carbohydrates, and soil bacteria absolutely thrive on it. As the bacterial population explodes, the soil becomes more biologically active, and worms follow the food chain. I've watched my soil go from compacted and lifeless to soft and crumbly. Within weeks of starting this practice, the molasses solution also helps break down organic matter faster, speeds up composting, and gives plants a gentle boost of micronutrients like iron, calcium, and magnesium. In warmer states where the growing season is long, you can use this technique from early spring through late fall. In cooler climates, focus on spring and summer when soil temperatures are warm enough for microbial activity. Make sure you're using unsulfured molasses, not the sulfate kind, because sulfur can actually inhibit beneficial bacteria. This is one of those secret weapons that seasoned gardeners swear by but rarely talk about. Once you try it, you'll understand why. Have you ever used molasses in your garden? Or does this sound like something completely new? Now let's talk about grass clippings, because this is one of the easiest materials to find and it works incredibly well. Every time you mow your lawn, you're creating fresh, nitrogen-rich material that worms love. I rake up grass clippings and spread them in thin layers around my vegetables, herbs, and perennials. The key is thin layers, maybe a ½ an inch at a time, because thick layers can mat down and start to smell as they decompose anaerobically. Grass clippings are moist, green, and full of nitrogen, which makes them heat up as they break down, attracting worms almost immediately. I've lifted grass mulch after just a few days and found worms feeding underneath. As the clippings decompose, they add nitrogen to the soil, which is exactly what leafy greens like lettuce, spinach, and kale need to grow lush and productive. If you're in the Midwest or Northeast where lawns are common, you got an endless supply of this material from spring through fall. Just make sure your lawn isn't treated with herbicides or pesticides, because those chemicals will harm worms and beneficial insects. Let the clippings dry for a day or two if they're really wet, then spread them out. They'll disappear within a couple of weeks, feeding your soil and your worms in the process. Do you usually bag your grass clippings, or have you been leaving them on the lawn? Here's a practical tip that ties everything together. You don't have to do all of these things at once. Start with 1 or 2 materials that you already have access to, maybe coffee grounds and cardboard, and see what happens. Watch for worm castings on the surface. Check under mulch layers. Dig gently around plant roots to see if worms are tunneling through. As you get more comfortable, layer in other materials like banana peels, eggshells, shredded leaves, or grass clippings. The goal is to create a continuous cycle of organic matter being added to the soil, so that worms always have something to eat and a reason to stick around. Healthy soil isn't built overnight. It's built through consistent small actions over time. Each handful of coffee grounds, each piece of cardboard, each banana peel you bury is an investment in the long-term health of your garden. And the beautiful thing is that once you get this system going, it becomes almost self-sustaining. The worms do the heavy lifting, aerating the soil, breaking down organic matter, and leaving behind castings that are 5 times richer in nutrients than regular soil. Your plants grow stronger, produce more, and become more resilient to pests and diseases. You spend less money on fertilizers and soil amendments because you're feeding the soil itself, not just the plants. Which of these methods sounds most doable for your garden right now? So here's what we've covered today. We talked about how coffee grounds, cardboard, banana peels, crushed eggshells, mulch, shredded leaves, compost tea, molasses, and grass clippings can all attract worms to your soil naturally and quickly. We busted the myth about buying worms and emphasized that creating the right environment is what really matters. And we explored how worms transform soil from the inside out, making it more productive, more resilient, and more alive. Gardening isn't just about growing plants. It's about building ecosystems, fostering life beneath the surface, and working with nature instead of against it. When you pour these simple, everyday materials into your soil, you're not just feeding worms. You're creating a foundation for abundance, for healthier food, for a garden that practically takes care of itself. So think about the materials you already have at home, the coffee grounds in your trash, the cardboard boxes in your garage, the banana peels from breakfast. All of that can become fuel for a thriving underground community that will repay you many times over. Which one of these worm-attracting techniques are you most excited to try first? And what plants are you hoping will benefit the most? If this video gave you some ideas or changed the way you think about soil, go ahead and tap that like button. And if you want more tips like this delivered straight to your feed, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Thanks for spending this time with me today, and I'll see you in the next one.